Good evening. Hey. How was the training room? Oh, hey. So we're going to start our program for the evening. We have this scheduled from 5:30 to 8. We will probably not go all the way to 8. But we have some really exciting things for you this evening. We're hoping it's a little participatory, so we gave you this first 30 minutes to eat your meals, but there's going to be some opportunities for you to engage. So one of the things that's really exciting about interfaith work is that there are some obvious ways that you can do it. If you're a religious leader, if you're working in civic life, but also if you're an athlete, if you are an artist, if you are just really engaged in your community garden. There are ways that if you are bridging across religious difference, if you're inviting people to bring their full selves to the work that you're doing, that all becomes interfaith work, right? Because it's not necessarily about the titles, it's about the spirit and skills that you're bringing to the community work that you're doing that enriches our social fabric and enriches civic life. So tonight we're going to focus on the arts and folks who are creating art and creating culture that's rooted in their religious identity and that gives them opportunities to engage in interfaith work and interfaith culture making all day. This conversation is going to be facilitated by my colleague, Harmeet Kaur Kamboj. If you don't know, Harmeet is dope. I know them. We work on the same team. They have been instrumental in making the Interfaith Leadership Summit happen, but also after hours, they are a Bhangra dancer and Bhangra dance teacher. They perform in parades. Their dance company travels across the country for performances. And so they know very intimately what it is to create art based in a particular tradition, and to share that with folks who don't share that history, who don't share that community or culture, but who want to engage and want to understand, and who are able to create other things by participating in what Harmeet's work is doing. So I'm going to invite our panelists to the stage. They're going to come from all over. Hey, hey, hey. And y'all can give them a round of applause. It's going to be great.
Good evening, everybody. How are we all doing tonight? I feel like we can do a lot better than that. How are we all doing tonight? That is much, much more like it. I know we're at the end of our first full day at the Interfaith Leadership Summit. We're all processing a lot and holding a lot in our bodies. A lot of that might be fatigue at the end of the day, but I'm so excited to be joined by my co-panelists this evening to talk about creating art and doing interfaith work, all at the same time. Some of the most powerful ways we can build communities and build community solidarity and communicate that work is through the arts. This evening, you'll hear from 3 artists using very different mediums to communicate our lived experiences as members of our faith, worldview, and cultural communities, and how we harness the power of those mediums to build interfaith solidarity. Artists are cultural communicators. We use our practice and expertise to share the richness of our traditions with those outside of our traditions, and through activities and experiences that you'll get to witness a little bit and experience a little bit yourselves tonight. But artists are also culture creators. We are able in our work not only to shine a light on the cultural context that we already exist in, but we also aspire and inspire in ways that challenge us to build new cultural norms and new cultural communities. I'm joined this evening by 2 brilliant artists and cultural creators, Zaheer Ali and Joshua Brian Campbell. Let's give them a round of applause. Zaheer Ali is an educator and oral historian with more than a decade of experience directing nationally recognized public history and cultural heritage initiatives. He's currently the inaugural executive director of the Hutchins Institute for Social Justice at the Lawrenceville School, a secondary school, or an innovative secondary school, rather, initiative supporting social justice teaching and practice through scholarship, programming, and experiential learning. In addition, he is an executive producer of American Muslims, A History Revealed, a digital film series and feature-length broadcast documentary currently in production. He is also the director of the Prince Syllabus, a curricular initiative exploring the life and work of Prince Rogers Nelson as a catalyst for social change. That is incredible, by the way. Joshua Brian Campbell is a singer, composer, songwriter, ministry worker, and actor from Cheraw, South Carolina. He is the co-writer, along with Cynthia Erivo, of the Oscar-nominated and World Soundtrack Award-winning Stand Up from the biopic Harriet. Joshua currently serves the student population at Wake Forest University's School of Divinity in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, as the Director of Music and Arts and as the Director of the University Gospel Choir. Of Baptist Metho-Costal roots, Joshua is a preacher and Christian educator in the AME Zion Church. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this evening, you're going to have the opportunity not only to hear from these incredible artists, but also to experience our art in a lot of different ways, through conversation, through embodiment, through movement, and through vocality as well. And we have each thought so thoroughly through the art that we bring into interfaith spaces, because this work is so critical to not only the life of our communities, but the longevity of our communities as well. So I'm so excited for you to have the opportunity to experience this. It's such a treat for us to be able to do this. And I'm mindful of the fact that folks are eating dinner right now. So please participate to a degree that's comfortable for you and is as accessible as possible for you. I want to turn it over first to Zaheer to walk us a little bit through some of your work.
Sure.
And we'll also have the opportunity to interact with some of Zaheer's work as well. Zaheer,
Sure.
take it away.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you. I guess the place that I would start is in the Quran, which is the scripture for Muslims, where we are told in one of the verses, "And your Lord says, 'Call on me, I will answer your prayer.'" Another verse says, "When my servants ask thee concerning me, I am indeed close to them. I listen to the prayer of every supplicant when he calls on me. Let them also with a will listen to my call and believe in me that they may walk in the right way." So in these verses, the Creator is presented as the supreme listener, and we are enjoined to be listeners as well. As an oral historian and documentarian, I have thought a lot about the relationship between listening and creation. We often think of creation as producing, that whatever we create is an outward expression of ourselves. And if there is no outward expression, we're somehow not creative. But just as listening is part of the work of the Supreme Creator, listening is also part of the work that we all do as creative people. We listen to the created world, even a world that has not yet been expressed, for inspiration, for breathing in, for what some people call the creative inhale. In my work as an oral historian, I call it the art of listening. Listening to stories, but also listening for stories that have not yet been told. Listening means creating space, nurturing trust, and inviting storytellers to share their stories. As active listeners, we are not just an audience of consumers, we are witnesses, we are participants, we are co-creators in the creative act of storytelling. In order for us to tell transformative stories, we must first become listeners of transformative stories. And so during our time together, I want us to think together and reflect and engage in some of that listening as a creative act. Listen for information. Listen for connection. listen to reflect the stories that we hear. Oftentimes when people are listening, what they're doing is searching for themselves in other people's stories. That's not really listening. Stories can certainly serve as mirrors to reflect, but they are also windows that allow us to see and expand what we know, that allow us to build new relationships, and that can activate us in transformative ways. So, in this short exercise, I'm going to introduce you to some stories that I have collected as part of a project I did called Muslims in Brooklyn. And so we're going to listen to 3 clips. I'm going to introduce you to the narrators all at once before we listen. And I'm going to invite you to listen, to focus your attention, to learn something new, to deepen your receptivity, to build a connection, and to open yourselves up to creative and transformative work. So when we say listen for reflect, they call it reflective listening. It's not for you to reflect on the story. It is for you to reflect the impact of the story, right? So that's activation. So we're going to hear 3 narrators talking about their experiences observing the month of Ramadan, when many Muslims fast during the daylight hours. The first clip you will hear is from Stacy Salima Bell, who is a retired New York City Department of Corrections captain, a Girl Scout troop leader, a 9/11 responder, and a founding member of the American Muslim Law Enforcement Officers Association. Then you will hear from Rabia Asin, who was born in Brooklyn in 1991 and spent most of her years growing up in the primarily Pakistani neighborhood of Midwood, Brooklyn. She is now a special education teacher in an all-girls secondary school. And then finally, you will hear from Mohammed Fayez, who was born in 1990, is an artist and curator of the Poppy Juice Collective for queer and trans people of color. So again, as you listen to these 3 clips, I want you to think about something that you learn, something that you connect with, and something that might activate you. Let's start the clips.
One of the major things that I loved about doing Scouts there is I brought some of the African American girls, we had Pakistani girls, we had Arab girls, we had African girls, and the one thing that's great about this country when Muslims converge is you start to see what's cultural and what's Islamic. When those girls sat in a circle and I asked them one question, what do you eat when you break fast during Ramadan? Do you eat something traditional? They were clearly things that were the same, and we knew that those things were the Islamic things. So when someone says, I break my fast with dates, with water, that's something traditional that the Prophet Muhammad did. But then when we start diverging, but for my iftar or for my meal, what I have is I have rice and beans. That came from the girl who was Puerto Rican. From the black girls, well, my mother made mac and cheese. We had greens. And then some of the other girls, well, that's not Muslim. And I would say, who says? Clearly it's Muslim. We eat different foods. We're supposed to have our culture.
Next clip.
We observed Ramadan every year, and I remember it was during Ramadan that I saw my dad pray. So outside of that month, I hadn't really seen him engage with religion on any serious level, but Ramadan was such an exciting month because we got to change up our routine. We would wake up in the middle of the night, or what seemed like the middle of the night, didn't realize it was early in the morning, but we would wake up, and since we lived in a townhouse at the time, And my aunt and uncle lived on the second floor, and we were on the first. And so it would become like a really fun, like, we're gonna eat all this junk food, and we're gonna eat all this like fun stuff in the morning with like my cousins and like everybody, and all of us. We would just like do this like really fun thing, and it did feel like a sense of like secret that we're keeping from like the outside world. Oh, we're not eating because this is our special month, and we're gonna eat together. Like whenever we break fast, and it's gonna be, you know, fun food. It's gonna be samosa and pakode and like all this like greasy, oily goodness. And you know, those things I think I remembered as a child and wanting so badly to fast, because it was like a secret kind of that I kept from like my peers, you know. And for me, that was like a really fun thing. And I think as a child, you know, feeling that kind of special, I don't even know, special association that I wouldn't have otherwise felt. Whereas like in other senses of like being different, like it was hard to be different, but it was nice to be different in this sense. And it was that for me was like a rare feeling.
Messy Muslims, cause we're messy. We're, you know, some of us don't practice, some of us practice, some of us eat bacon, some of us some of us don't only eat halal food, some of us grew up Muslim and are maybe not really Muslim anymore in the sense of like practicing, but are still Muslim, if that makes sense. And some of us have complicated relationships with Islam. Some of us fast and some of us don't. So last year the group was very active, and we started meeting up, and we started having dinners, and we started going to the Yemeni cafe on Atlantic, and just like endless tea, and like just ordering plates and plates. And places like that are amazing because they don't kick you out. Like the check will never arrive unless you ask for it, which is ideal. And it's amazing because I think we all got that from our families, and the way our families sit around and act and stuff. And so messy in that sense. And it's beautiful because I really wasn't fasting. I wasn't really for Ramadan until this group chat. And last year I did 10 days. And then this year I did 25. Like all on my own volition. And it's beautiful because I can bring it up in the chat, like, hey, like, what are y'all eating? Because this oatmeal's not cutting it, you know? And it's beautiful because then some of the girls can be honest, like, oh, I'm actually not fasting this whole week because I'm on my period. And like for me, as like someone who grew up male, to be like, oh, not freak out about that is like so beautiful to also talk about that and to think about like, oh, like, are there other ways you do, like what else do you do in Ramadan if you can't exactly fast? Like, are you fasting the mind or the spirit or the tongue? And like to have these conversations about like what Islam is for us in 2018 is really beautiful because there's no right answer to it.
Okay, so we're going to give you a minute. This is normally done over a longer period of time. But I want you to turn to your neighbor and talk amongst yourselves for a minute. Something that you learned, something that you connected with, and something that activated you. So we're going to start the clock now.
Also, in terms of activation, like this resonance with there being something about the human identity that coexists within its as a category. Maybe it's not neat. It's never neat, but it's a fault. It's something false or something.
Okay, I think We are, okay, I hear all of the active conversations, and I hate to call you back. In an ideal world, this would spring forward all kinds of conversations. So, can we all come back to the room? How do y'all do that? Clap. Okay.
Nice.
When I was in school, we'd flick the lights. Okay. Okay, so I hope that you began to get a sense of what listening as a creative act can be, because now I'm going to ask you to be creative in another short time. I'm going to ask you to hopefully partner up. I know there's some odd number arrangements, so you can just improvise. So we have about 5 minutes of this portion left. So for 2.5 minutes, I want one of you to tell a story, and there's a prompt, to share a memory when you were invited to someone else's celebration and learned something new. And so while one of you is sharing this story for 2.5 minutes, the other person is listening. Listen for information, listen for connection, listen for activation. And then at the 2.5 minute mark, I will signal for you to swap roles, and the story listener will become the storyteller, and the storyteller will become the story listener for another 2.5 minutes. Does that sound good? Yes? All right, your time starts now. Is my mic? Okay. You should now get ready to swap roles. Swap roles. The story listener becomes the storyteller, and the storyteller becomes the story listener. New stories, time starts now. Okay. Is my mic live? Yes? All right. We should be winding down now. Thank you so much for engaging in this brief activity of storytelling and story listening. And I think I'm going to pass the mic back over to Harmeet to continue chairing our program.
Thank you so much, Zaheer, and thank you all. Yes. We're going to continue chatting about Zaheer's brilliant work and especially this activity. And I would love to gauge from the room, like, how did that feel for you? Can I get a thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, thumbs down? Yes, yes. Raise your hand if you, from your partner, learned about a tradition that you weren't very familiar with before. Awesome. I love that. I love that. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the discussion that we had on stage, but I first want to pass the mic back to you, Zaheer, to talk about what, especially in this activity and in the work that you do in promoting listening as a form of artistic expression in interfaith spaces. Like, what do you hope to accomplish with that?
So, I think that we are in this attention economy. There's so much emphasis on how to attract and hold people's attention. And so everyone wants to be like a broadcaster, a podcaster, like a creative, an influencer. And we're in a very expressive, biased culture. And what I'm trying to think about and think through is, how is listening part of that ecosystem? And so thinking about listening as part of the creative ecosystem, that there is a way to ask people or to encourage people to expand our bandwidth, right? When most people go out in search of something, or they go out to, they sit down for a conversation, they tend to have like a very focused question in mind, like this prompt, right? Like there's a specific thing that I'm looking for. Or when you do like a Google search, you're looking for a specific thing. How many people that go to page 10 of that search, right? And so the question is, how are we opening ourselves up not only to what is expected, but the unexpected encounter, right? And so how do we expand our bandwidth beyond the thing that we're looking for? If anyone's ever done research in the library, this is the equivalent of like, you have like the call number. I don't know if y'all know what call numbers are. You have a call number for a book that you're going to. You go to the shelf where that book is located. You find that book, but then you also start looking at the books before it, the books after it, the books above the shelf, the books below the shelf. That's opening yourself up to the unexpected encounter, right? And so it's not only like listening for the expected, listening for the unexpected, but then the third ring out is listening for the resonant, the thing that echoes, the thing that sticks with you after the encounter, something that you may not have noticed at the time, but after you've come away, you're like, oh, I heard this thing, and I'm wondering about it. And then the final ring in that sort of expanding bandwidth of listening as a creative process is listening for the unexplained, the illegible, the inaudible, the thing that you don't get at the moment, but you want to understand, right? And so we have a curiosity deficit, even in an information-saturated world. And it's the curiosity deficit that we have to fill. Like, we have to satisfy. We have to create and inspire curiosity. And so in terms of how this fits in with interfaith work, like, the first thing is, like, you have to be genuinely curious to learn, right? And so for me, that's how I think about, like, listening. What is the role of listening in nurturing curiosity as part of the creative process?
Awesome. I'm gonna walk away with that phrase, curiosity deficit. I think that's really gonna stick with me when I leave this room. You may have noticed that we were also participating in the activity up on stage here while y'all were chatting. And I want to pass the mic over to Joshua because we were engaging in this activity together, and Zaheer was a witness to that. And I want to hear from you. What were your reactions? Like, what was coming up for you as we were participating in this activity together?
Yeah, we got cut off, so I couldn't give my response. So I'll give it publicly now.
Yes, please.
So here at the call time. I think one thing that was coming up for me when you asked Zaheer, like, how do you navigate being the different one or the outside one, quote unquote, having these experiences with new traditions or new communities? And I think there's a tendency to, a very self-preservational tendency to focus on what's common, what feels familiar. Oh, that's just like what we do. That's what my folks do. But there is perhaps a deficit of attention, right, on focusing on those things that are different, those things that feel uncomfortable, that feel like edges that are rubbing up against what you know or what's familiar, right? And I think for me, the exercise caused me to sort of reflect on, like, actually what was different, what made me feel like I was sticking out like a sore thumb, right? Because in those places, there's a lot of insight.
I really like that a lot because, when you think about attention, I like to think of attending to. So attention is not something that you should do from a static place. Attention asks you to go to, right? Like, if you attend to someone, like, you go to them. And when you are listening to someone, you don't want, it's not about, like, them bringing their, like, the greatest speaker is going to try to go to where the audience is, right? But as a listener, it's go to where the speaker is, go to where the story is. That's what it means to attend to a story. There are like three kinds of listening that people have sometimes talked about. There's attentive listening, affiliative listening, and reflective listening. So attentive listening is like that, attending to. Affiliative listening is that connection, but it's not the sort of narcissistic, like, where does this thing connect with me? It's really, where do I connect with that? Like, how do I go to that and find connection where that thing is? And the reflection, which I've talked about before, is how do you reflect that you have been impacted by the story? A lot of people think reflective listening is like, my thoughts on the story. No, that's not reflective listening. Reflective listening is, how do you reflect the story's impact on you? And so I really liked your response.
Yeah, and I'm putting together a lot of pieces of what you shared, Joshua, about what it means to show up in a space and not necessarily try to lean in on the similarities and really actually lean into what's, those edges. And I'm thinking about the listening that we did earlier to with those clips and the final speaker talking about their Messy Muslims group. And I think about being in spaces, I was chatting about an iftar that I attended alongside a Turkish Muslim community a few years ago. And Zaheer asked me, like, how did you show up in that space knowing that you were, quote unquote, an outsider or just not a member of that community? And I think that is a question that I ask myself in many spaces, right? Not just spaces that are unfamiliar to me in terms of religious tradition, or not my own tradition. It's a matter of understanding that I'm going into any space with a number of identities, and those that conglomeration of identities may or may not reflect back to me in the room that I'm in. So I've been thinking about that as well, and really appreciate all of the reflection that you have all been doing and the reflective listening that you have been doing, that we have been doing up here on stage, I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that you do as a filmmaker and about the values that you communicate in that work. Later tonight, folks will have the opportunity to partake in movie night. And we have a couple films produced by an evangelical Christian production company. And I am, I think for many years I've been really stunned by how much the evangelical Christian film industry has grown. And that this project of film production has been a great deal about communicating values that are important to these folks creating these films, and about also self-reflection about what those values actually are and what they mean to their broader community. And so I wanted to ask you, Zaheer, how do you approach, especially in the filmmaking process, like how you want to communicate your values, whether those are tied to your tradition, to your community's accountability?
Sure. So, I think that there's a desire to, a lot of people have focused, when they talk about film, especially in representations on film, they focus on representation, right? Like, do we have the right? And there is no way to, and you think of like Muslim communities, or really any communities, are so diverse. There's no way to ever achieve complete representativeness, right? So I don't think in terms of representation, I think in terms of indication. Like, this is not representative of, this is indicative of, right? So you're getting a sample, right? You're not getting the full meal, right? Hopefully, this sample inspires curiosity again, right? So like, you come to this particular story, I don't want you thinking that you have learned everything that there is to know about this person or about this event or about this issue. I want you coming away thinking, wow, there is so much to learn, right? And so I see the films or the stories as the floor, not the ceiling, right? Like, this is just the foundation. This is just a foundation. And then in terms of dealing with identity, I think that as much as the work comes out of a faith tradition or comes out of my idea of my faith, and the way that I approach my religious identity is that I do not see my religious identity as a box that you can put me in, or any of the narrators that I've worked with in documentary work. For them and for us, being Muslim is just one of the ways to explain who we are. And so I say it's not a box you put us in, it's a box we stand on, right? It is just one of the platforms, but it cannot fully encompass the fullness, the complexity of who we are. And so, any documentary work is going to be, it's going to be an excerpt. And so, just a final point, in the tradition of Islam, there's this idea that there's a phrase called Kitab, which means mother of the book. And the idea is that there is in existence this body of knowledge of the divine from which the scriptures that we have are just excerpts, right? So the Quran is just an excerpt of the mother of the book, the Bible, all of these scriptures. And so I see whatever we're producing, again, big creator, little creator, is just an excerpt. You're just getting an insight, a disclosure of a small excerpt of a much wider body of life, of experience. And so that's how I see it.
Awesome. I'm going to, there are so many nuggets of wisdom that I'm going to be taking away from this room, but I love that imagery of this is not a box you're putting us in, but a box we're standing on top of. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zaheer. And let's give Zaheer a round of applause. I'm going to pass the baton over to Joshua Brian Campbell now to speak to us a little bit about your artistic work, about your artistic medium, and about how that connects to your interfaith work.
Yeah, so if my fellow musicians, you can go ahead and kind of join me over here. So I'm a singer and composer and songwriter who's native to the Black American South. I'm from the country in South Carolina. And so a lot that's endemic to that cultural experience is the musical and spiritual pathways of enslaved persons, descendants of slaves, their musics, their cultures, their histories, their broader cosmological art forms. And part of what I do is work in the spiritual and freedom song tradition. Pardon me as I get my feet ready. Which is a tradition that, as I was sharing with my fellow musicians earlier today, was a living tradition for me. The songs that we're about to sing, I was taught as something that the folks who taught them to me used as a part of their spiritual technologies. It wasn't like a textbook thing. It was like, these are songs that we sang when we were marching to protest school segregation, right? These are songs that we sang in church. And they were passed to me that way. And so I stand in a lineage of folks who continue that work. So we're gonna sing. We're gonna sing. Oh, I hear you. We're gonna sing a little bit. Who sings? Wave at me if you sing. Be honest. Yeah. Because there's some more in the room. Yeah, Yeah. Yeah. Okay, got you. So we're gonna do a medley up front. If these songs are familiar to your tradition, right? If you know, sing along when you know, right? My tradition is also a call and response tradition. So if you hear a call that you respond to, yeah. If something resonates with you, it's okay to express that, right? So we're gonna start with the spiritual, and then we'll go into a freedom song, and then we'll go into sort of a marching song. I may do some talking and teaching in between, if that's okay. Okay. Give it up for these musicians. Thank you. So as I said, these are rooted in Christian spirituality and cosmology and code language, and I'll talk more later. Let me just sing. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Oh, steal away, steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Oh, steal away. Still away home. I ain't got long to stay. Still away, still away, still away to Jesus. Oh, still away. taught us a song that says, "Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me." And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in grave and go home to my Lord and be oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be no more dying, no more dying, no more dying over me. Before I'll be a slave to my and be no more moaning, no more moaning, no more moaning over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go to my Lord and be free and go to my Lord and be and go home to my Lord and be free. Now, this next one, we'll need some clapping of your hands. Thank you. This next one, some of you might know, it might be a little more familiar. It's a marching song that says, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around, ain't gonna let no." Y'all have good rhythm. Turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Oh, I ain't gonna let injustice turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Oh, ain't gonna let injustice, no. I'm gonna keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on talking, keep on fighting, keep on praying, keep on walking, keep on talking. I'll fight if I have to. Keep on praying, keep on walking. Keep on talking. Keep on fighting. Keep on praying. Keep on walking. Keep on talking. Keep on fighting. Okay, this next part we're gonna sing all together. It goes like this. We say, keep on marching to the freedom land. Can y'all say that? Say, keep on marching to the thank you so much. Keep on marching to the freedom land. Keep on marching to the freedom. Can you clap and sing at the same time? Say, keep on marching to the freedom land. No matter what happens, I'll keep on marching to the freedom. It's what I believe in. Keep on marching to the freedom land. Keep on marching. Keep on marching to the one last time, real big. Keep on marching. Keep on marching to the freedom land. Give yourselves one. Beautiful, beautiful. Everybody come to Winston-Salem and be in my choir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joshua, so much. And let's give a round of applause to Joshua and their beautiful accompanist.
Marcus Handy.
Yes.
Marcus Handy on keys. We have Tiana Menzies.
Yes.
Renee Harris and Nate Martin. And the singers are all part of a group called Nate Martin and Sign. So if you like gospel music, go buy and stream Nate Martin and Sign. They have some projects out, so listen to them. And if you're in Chicago, support them.
Amazing, incredible. Thank you all so much for blessing us with that this evening. How are we feeling right now after not only witnessing but participating in that? Absolutely incredible, absolutely incredible. Joshua, I want to throw the same question at you that I asked Zaheer earlier. Is as you talked us through the many traditions that you have been inspired by, that you walk in the shoes of, to do this kind of work. Like, what do you hope to accomplish in your music, particularly?
Well, as I said, the freedom song tradition, I stand at a lineage of artists who have done this work, who've carried on the freedom songs and work songs and songs that come from, that are technologies that arise out of the experience of black folks' enslavement and black folks' spiritual expressions during that. Artists like Bernice Johnson Regan, Sweet Honey in the Rock, Fifth Jubilee Singers, Odetta, my mentor and friend Imani Uzuri, and the list goes on. I think one of the goals is selfishly to not let these songs die. I feel, I'm not that old, but a lot of times when I'm working with this material, it's new, especially to people who are younger than me, because it's falling out of use in some context as living tradition, as living technology. And there's a scholar, Arthur Jones, I believe his name is, who sort of employs spirituals and the use of spirituals and the performance of spirituals as a way for especially black folks and also invitationally other folks, if I might add, if I'm not misquoting his work, to deal with the psychological issues of like racism and living in the world that we live in, right? So I think my goal is not dissimilar from that, to like give people text and technology and something to attach to their breath, right, to help make it whatever that may mean.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you honing in on the fact that this artistic medium, this work that you do, is also a bridge to connection with ancestry, to connection with older traditions, as you say, that you've been noticing are being lost, and with the goal of not simply reviving them, but also to really honor the ancestry that is held within these musical traditions.
Indeed.
I appreciate that so much.
Indeed.
I am thinking a lot about the variety of communities who you hold in your work, particularly Black communities, particularly Black communities with ancestry going back to folks who were enslaved in the South, particularly, and how this project is not only in an effort to harken back to a time of impossible hardship, but that the hope there and how community-oriented that hope is. I think about, in Brooklyn, I live in New York City in Harlem, but I used to live in Brooklyn, and I think about the emerging art scene among the Hasidic Jewish community in Williamsburg particularly, and how these art galleries are cropping up all around Williamsburg, Brooklyn, run and hosted by and featuring art from Hasidic Jewish artists. And this is a part of a larger project of not only preserving culture and preserving history, but about honoring that culture, honoring that history, honoring ancestry. I want to ask you a little bit about how you understand your art honoring your community, particularly given the fact that we live in a culture in the United States that is predominantly white, Protestant, Christian.
Yeah, I thank you, Fran. Another seminary classmate of ours. The spiritual and freedom tradition's relationship to hegemonic Christianity, which, yes, there's a relationship there. That's not the full story of what it's doing or what's happening when folks from my tradition sing this stuff, or when people from outside the tradition hear it. Perhaps more so for folks outside. Like, that's not the full story of what's happening, right? Like, contained within this is technologies of not just African and African diasporic traditions and religious practices and systems, but also back to what you said about hope. There's just something happening that is in conversation, contradistinction, tension with always hegemonic Christianity. And it's this thing of like, the hope is in the music, the hope is in the thing, and it's always there, even in the face of gratuitous violence, even in the face of so many historical, geographic translations and transformations. Like, as I was teaching this stuff earlier to the singers, I said, "Where are all y'all grandparents from?" And they said, "Mississippi." Right? Like, and so, we're everywhere in diaspora. I hope it was okay for me to share that. We're everywhere in diaspora, and even folks outside of Black or African American diaspora, I think can connect to what these songs and what this tradition is doing, what it activates us to do, what it makes us feel, that is not completely reducible. In its honesty, it does stand in Christian tradition and Christian lineage, but it's not reducible to that. And I think that's quite beautiful.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that you pulled out that point, because I think one of the through lines with all of the ways that we approach our artistic mediums is that this isn't an artistic project that solely falls in the category of the religious tradition that we most closely identify with. It really speaks to the complexity of our individual identities and the complexity of the collective identities of the communities that we come from.
Indeed.
I really appreciate that. You mentioned activation, how not only this music, but this art form and the community that you can create through that art activates activates folks. And I want to turn it to Zaheer, actually, because even just having the honor of taking in y'all's performance, I felt that activation within me, like goosebumps all over my body, wanting to get up. And I want to ask you, Zaheer, like, how, like, just your reaction to experiencing this, like, what is activated within you?
So, music educators, they talk about this thing called perceptual structuring, to talk about like, everyone is not a musician, everyone can't sing, but part of the experience of music relies on, and I'm just going to be that listening evangelist, relies on what the listener is doing, right? Yeah. That whether it's language or sound, it's as a listener, your brain that takes in this sound and arranges it in a way that makes sense, right? So that a melodic phrasing registers to you as something that sounds pleasant or odd, like there's, especially if you're raised in the Western tonal scale, there are ways you anticipate what notes will come because they're notes that are allowed within certain, like if it's in the key of this, right, or the key of that, right? So there's a kind of ways that as a listener, if you're listening to music, you have to be activated. You are being activated. You are part of the musical experience as a listener. And so similar, like that, like there are things that, there were clear songs that I'd heard before, right? And things that registered. And although I don't come from the Christian tradition, there's a meaning for it for me, just like for all of you. For some of you, this might be the first time you've heard these songs, but the next time you hear it, you'll be like, oh, that thing. That's perceptual structuring, right? So that's the thing that's the activation. And that's the reason why music is so powerful. That is because we do it with words too, but words have like such fixed definitions in our, it's like, this is the word, this is what it means. It's like really drawn out. Whereas music is not so literal or allows itself to a more openness of experience. And I think that's why people like music is a universal language. It's kind of like you can reach people with music in ways that you can't reach with words because the perceptual structuring is not as restrictive.
Absolutely. Perceptual structuring. I love that. I want to throw that question to all of y'all. In just a word or a phrase, I want you to talk, yell, signal back at us. Like what was activated in you as you were watching, listening, taking in this performance? Let me know.
We're listening.
We're listening. Power, yes. Power. What else? Sorry? Admiration, absolutely. What else was activated in you? Passion. What was that up here? Wonder, awesome. What else? Vision, ambition. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I love that. I want to pass the proverbial mic, but also the literal mic back to Joshua, because I think we're going to maybe join you.
One more song.
In another song.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is audience participation required this time.
Okay. So this song, thank you for your responses, by the way, and thank you for this conversation. This song I wrote in about 2014-ish. It was somewhere around or after, I believe, the death of Michael Brown, when I was an undergraduate student. And I suppose it is a protest song, but I don't think of it that way. It was just a song at the time about what I was going through and feeling, right? And so, yeah, I won't say much more about it. I'll just teach it. So we'll need to do a little body percussion. I don't know, we're on carpet, so it's going to be a little muted. So foot stomps aren't going to work too good. But this part, if this is accessible to you, this part of your body makes a lot of noise if you tap it like so. So we'll just practice a little bit. So, yeah, but do it with me this time, okay? So there'll be a count of 1, 2, ready, and 1, and Okay, y'all got it. Great. So this is the melody, and this is all you need to know. You can sing it higher if you have a higher voice, or lower if you have a lower voice. Okay? The magic of music, of Western, 12-tonal music. So the melody, the words are, I'm gonna sing out.
I'm gonna sing out.
Yeah, I'm gonna march on.
I'm gonna march on.
So melody goes like this. Just sing after me. I'm gonna sing out. Sing that.
I'm gonna sing out.
Gorgeous. This is the second half. I'm gonna march on. Ready?
I'm gonna march on.
Okay, go ahead and give yourselves a preliminary hand, because that was really good. That was real, real good. So just watch me for when you come in, okay? All right. So you can help me up top like this. Hum. Sounds good. Well, I marched through the storm, and I marched through the rain, and I marched through some sickness and some heartache and pain. And I laid on the ground, and I looked up at the sky, and I prayed to the Lord up above and asked why. But oh no, I'm not tired. I'm not through marching yet, and I'm a march until I die. Oh children, this you can bet. And I'll say I'm gonna sing out. I'm gonna march on. You remember that? Everybody say beautiful. I'm gonna sing out. Gonna march on. I'm gonna march on. I got to keep on keeping on. I'm gonna sing out. Gonna march on. I'm gonna march on. One more time, real strong. Say I'm gonna sing out. Gonna march on. Gonna march on. Well, my grandmama marched, and my granddaddy too. And I never thought it'd be something that I have to do. But I'll march if I must. I'm on a mission, you see. And I'll be damned if my children have to march for me. Now I believe in the power of raising my voice. And I believe in the power of making some noise. And if I die, I can't sing. But if I can't sing, I'll die. So we should sing for one another. Now let's give it a try. So we say, I'm gonna sing out. I'm gonna march. I'm gonna march. Everybody said, I'm gonna sing out. Gonna march on. I got to keep on keeping on. I'm gonna sing. You got it, you got it. Gonna march on. One more time. I'm gonna sing out. Gonna march on. Let's see if you can do this part with us. Oh, tell me what we gonna do. Sing out, march on. Hey, sing out, march on. Yeah. Sing out, march on. Yeah. Can I hear you do that? Sing out, say. Sing out my joy. Sounds good. Sing out my joy. Yeah, yeah. Hey, sing out my joy. Yeah. Down to South Carolina, back into New Orleans, right here in Chicago, and everywhere in between. Say I'm gonna sing out. Real big, one big choir. I'm gonna march on. What I do? I'm gonna sing out. Gonna march on. Gonna march yeah, I gonna sing out. Gonna march on. I'm gonna march on. Last time, real big. Oh. I'm gonna sing out. I'm gonna march on. Give yourselves a big, 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 big hand.
I need to take a deep breath just because I'm I'm honestly very emotional right now because I have a strong tradition of call and response, justice-oriented song in my own tradition. And I know we talked a lot about those, recognizing those edges where we are different, but this feels so familiar to me that it's stirring up so much within me. I just want to thank you so much again, Joshua, and so much to your amazing accompanists.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're gonna keep the ball rolling with one last artist, which is myself. Thank you. You are so kind. So I am a program manager at Interfaith America. That's what I consider to be my quote-unquote day job, although interfaith work is the core work that I do in my life. But another core part of my being is my art as a dancer. I've been a professional dancer for the last 15 years and trained in South Asian classical dance forms, in folk dances. Latanya mentioned my skills as a Bhangra dancer and teacher, and also in Indo-Western fusion forms of dance as well. I want to tell you a little bit about how I became a dancer because whenever I share this story, it does surprise people because I am such a dedicated dancer that folks don't ever really guess that I dragged my feet getting into this art form. But when I was about 12 years old, my family was living in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, in a very white, very Protestant community. And that was where I spent all of my time, especially my social time. I was the only Sikh student at my school, and I think the only South Asian student at my school as well. And so I was, maybe in a ways that I didn't even realize at that time, was very far away from my cultural and religious roots. And my mom noticed, and she got really worried. She was really worried that I was going to miss out on not only who I am, but who my ancestors and who my family are. And the tradition of dance is so robust in South Asia that was sort of her first intervention, I guess, to that project was, hey, I know an auntie who's teaching a dance class, and I think you should go and maybe try it out. So I showed up at this auntie's house, and she had a beautiful studio in her basement. And I want to shout out every auntie who immigrated to the United States and started a dance school in the basement of her house. My co-instructors and I at the Moksha Arts Dance Company in New York City, we joke a lot about those aunties and the basements that they taught us in. Sometimes they were dusty, sometimes they were small, sometimes the basements weren't even finished and we were dancing on concrete. But the dedication of those aunties in sharing not only our cultural roots with us, but really allowing us the opportunity to live into our identities is so special and has clearly had a long-term impact. But when I started dancing at 12 years old, I did it begrudgingly because I was like, I don't know, I don't think I can dance, Mom. I'm not sure that this is the right move for me. But one class and I was hooked. And so as I grew up and moved through high school and college, I felt not only just a desire to connect with my culture, but to really grow into my many identities. And part of that work was to learn many different styles of South Asian dance. So I'm trained in a South Asian classical dance called Kathak. That is, in my very biased opinion, an incredibly rich and diverse tradition of classical dance, with the roots not only in South Asia, but in Persia as well. If you ever watch Kathak dance, you might notice it looks a little bit similar to flamenco dance from Spain because they come from the same place. And it also has its roots as a devotional dance form in Hindu traditions. So it's an interreligious dance form even. And the folk dance that I specialize in is called Bhangra. Bhangra comes from the Punjab region of South Asia. And the way that we understand Bhangra these days is actually a conglomeration of a lot of folk dances from many tribes across Punjab. And I want to say that because in Punjab, we have a very socially rigid and oppressive caste system, and I wouldn't be doing my due diligence by not naming the fact that this tradition that has largely been co-opted by upper caste folks has actually originated in tribal communities that have historically been oppressed by the caste system. And so Bhangra is from the part of South Asia that my family hails from, Punjab. And when I began learning Bhangra and doing Bhangra, I was with some of my cousins who started an academy in Northern Virginia, where partly I grew up. And I kind of did it as a favor to them. But when I really got to stop and understand what I was doing with those movements, why my heart was beating so quickly as I was doing these very, very cardio-intensive movements, I suddenly felt so much more connected to not only who I am, but who my mom is, who got me started on this dance journey, who my parents are, who my ancestors are. And that's because Bhangra has its roots in farming communities in Punjab. Farming is critical to the sustenance of all of our communities, even today. And in Punjab, the celebration of the harvest season is a central cultural celebration and has since become a central religious celebration for Sikhs. I want to say that just like how we've been talking about the way that our art, although it has interfaith components to it, also highlights a variety of our individual and collective community identities, Bhangra does the same thing. It's a cultural dance, but has a great deal of religious significance in the Sikh tradition, although it's not a liturgical dance, because the ethnic majority among Sikhs is the folks are from Punjab. So when I started doing Bhangra, I noticed, I was like, oh, you know what? Like this step, it's called Hathi Chal. Hathi Chal means the walk of the elephant. And there's another step called Tamal that sometimes is called Kora, and Kora means horse. And there's another step called Fasla. And Fasla, you know, when I watch somebody do that step, it does remind me of the way that wheat flows in the wind. And I started putting the pieces together, not only through the embodied dance form itself, but through research of my own, learning from my elders and my peers about how the tradition of Bhangra shows up for them in their lives, that this is a celebration of life. It's a celebration of sustenance, and it is such a core part of who I am, not only because Bhangra is a celebration of that life, but because farming is a hugely important part of the Sikh tradition as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I do want to invite y'all to join me in some dancing. I am a dance instructor, and so I would love, if you're done with your meals, if you're able and willing to get up with me. I'm gonna take my shoes off, where we love to be shoeless on this stage, and get up with me. Let's get on up, folks. Let's do a little bit of dancing. Alrighty, before we get started in the actual movements, I see some folks stretching. I do want you to slowly bring your arms up and reach all the way to the sky. Check in with your body, make sure it's a little warmed up for what we're about to do here. And if you need to stretch over to the sides, get that radius going. I don't want anybody to pull a muscle during this. Now, as a dance teacher, I teach all ages, and so I'm very, very used to mirroring my students, and so I'll tell you now, like, this is your left, and this is your right. And folks on stage, I'm sorry, you're just gonna have to figure it out. But I wanna walk you through some of the most significant steps in kind of my formation, the formation of my identity, not only as a Punjabi, but as a Punjabi Sikh and a Punjabi American Sikh. And I talked to you about wheat flowing in the wind. So the move that we demonstrate, wheat flowing in the wind at the harvest season, is called fasla. And I'm going to show you the arms first, and then we're going to put some feet into it. So you're going to make 2 fists down in the bottom corner here, and you're going to bring your hands over your head. Wheat's blowing in the wind on this side, and then back to the right, and back to the left. Oh my gosh, if only you could get my view right now with all these arms moving in sync. It really does look like a field of wheat flowing in the wind. That's really beautiful. So grab the wheat, and it's flowing to the left, to the right, back to the left. Now with your feet, you're going to lift them up behind you and then hop. Lift the other up behind you and hop. So, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Alrighty, so we're gonna put this all together. Now when I go down to grab the wheat, my left leg goes up, and then I'm gonna switch, and switch, and switch. Awesome, let's do that a little bit faster. We'll do it twice in a row. Ready? 5, 6, 7, 8, and grab. Throw, throw, throw. One more time. Grab, throw, throw, throw. Absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. Thank you, thank you. Oh, you thought we were done? We're not done yet. Now, a similar step is called hati chal, which I mentioned earlier. It's the walk of the elephant. And you'll notice why it's called that, because part of this step is very similar. You have the same feet where you're kicking back and hopping, but rather than moving your arms over your body, you're swaying your arms from side to side beneath you. So when I do this step, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you watch that, doesn't it kind of look like a trunk of an elephant swaying as it's walking by? That's why it's called hati chal. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're gonna clap up top here and make 2 fists down here. Clap up top again, and then make 2 fists. You just learned an 8 count. Congratulations. So let's do that. Let's do sway for 4, and then clap, fist, Ready? 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, clap up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Amazing, amazing. All right. And now the last step that I want to teach you is called, as I said before, sometimes called Gora, which means horse. I know it better as Tamal. And it's a step that depending on how comfortable you are and how tight your pants are, you lift your leg up quite high, and you're gonna hop 3 times on your anchor leg. 1, 2, 3. And then you're gonna switch to the other leg and you hop 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Alrighty? Now, you can do whatever you want with your arms. I like to call this uncle hands because every South Asian uncle will put up their index fingers at every party and just jam. I'm gonna put my uncle hands up in a nice big B, and I'm gonna hop 3 times on one leg and then 3 times on the other. Ready? 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and switch. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Last one. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. I want to check in with you because I heard a lot of laughing, which I love, because Bhangra is about joy. Bhangra, the word actually means intoxicated with joy. Because we're celebrating the harvest season, we are so joyful that we have been blessed with food for another season. And I want to ask you, like, who found that joyous as an experience? Who found that challenging? Who felt nervous to participate at all? Yeah. And then, you know what? You did participate, and I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for doing it. Now feel free to take a seat. I'm going to put my shoes back on. Now I want to talk a little bit about the farming culture of Punjab and how meaningful farming culture is not only to the Punjabi community, but to every community, and how I engage with that legacy, with that history, through my interfaith work and through a lot of my justice work as well. Last year and the year before, in the state of India, you may have read in the news that over 1 million Indian farmers stopped everything to flock to New Delhi and protest legislation that was going to be ruinous not only to their careers, but to their lives. And because of the nature of the agricultural industry in South Asia broadly, but in India specifically, many of these farmers were Punjabi, and as a result, many of them were Sikhs. And on the ground, all these folks came together because they understood that food is life, that not only their livelihoods, but their lives and their communities were at risk as a result of this proposed legislation. And so they stopped everything. They boycotted all operations on their farms, flocked to Delhi to demonstrate, and millions of folks around the world sent resources, sent words of encouragement, sent themselves even to India, to New Delhi in support. And when finally, after more than a year of protesting, the government decided to repeal that legislation, I will never ever forget the first video that I saw come across my Twitter feed in celebration of that win for farmers. And it was elders in my community and many others like mine dancing in the streets, and they were doing Bhangra in celebration of this win in the name of justice for themselves and for their communities. And when I think about what justice means, not only within Punjabi communities, but in the Sikh tradition, I feel so connected to my ancestors, the 10 gurus who formed our tradition, who fought literally life or death to preserve not only their freedom, but the freedom of all marginalized communities around them. So when I do Bhangra, even though it's not a liturgical dance necessarily, it's a dance that's close to many of the communities that I feel a part of, and it's close to many of the identities that I occupy. So I wanted to say that a little bit, and I also want to ask y'all a little bit about that experience of dancing with me on stage. Is this a new dance form for you? Either of you?
I've never done it. I've been around it. You know, there were dance companies when I was in college, but no, it was new to my body.
Yeah.
Same. I mean, so my family is from Trinidad, which is a mix. Well, my family is a mix of all of the cultures of Trinidad, and so we did grow up a little bit with Bollywood.
Yeah.
So some of the dancing is familiar. And then there was this period of time in the late 90s, early 2000s where there was significant crossover with hip hop and Bhangra, like Punjabi MC and Missy Elliott and Timbaland borrowed heavily from those beats. So did the Neptunes, and so the rhythms are familiar. I guess I never knew the origins of it, and that to me is the fascinating thing of like how a lot of these cultural practices come out of working people, laborers, right? Whether it's people on the field or whatever, and how it's really important to honor that, because what happens is that they get, sort of packaged, and the culture gets, packaged as like, oh, this thing that loses that connection. So I really appreciated that. I was thinking of, like, I have a friend who does like stepping, and of course, stepping is part of the tradition of African American Greek letter organizations, but also like the gumboot dance of South Africa, right? And so like there's this way of like movement being linked to labor, which I appreciate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for lifting that up. And I want to uplift the point that you made about ways that these traditions transform with time and space, and also the ways that they unfortunately get sanitized by majority cultures as well. I like to talk about how, like, my entry into knowing about and learning Bhangra was through this elaborate community of competitive dance teams. Your college or university probably has a Bhangra team. And I wasn't aware of this rich history prior to it, just because of the sanitization, because of the way that caste politics work, because of the way that culture in the United States works. And so being able to dig deeply into the history of the tradition was so formative for me in my, I think, relationship with my Sikh identity as well as my cultural Punjabi identity. I am mindful of our time, and I know we've gone a little bit over, but I would just love all of you to join me in thanking our panelists one last time. Before I invite Latanya back up to make a few announcements, and before we exit the stage, I just want to offer all of you the invitation to think about ways that art in its many, many forms shows up in your life, and any small or large connections that you may have to it through the many traditions, the many communities, the many identities that you occupy, and how those identities, traditions, and communities intersect with each other. So thank you so much for sharing your evening with us. So grateful to spend this time with you. I think we can leave. We do have time. All right.
Do y'all want to see Harmeet dance video? I'm gonna let you introduce it.
Sure. So, as I said, I'm a dance instructor, and the company that I dance and teach with is called the Moksha Arts Dance Company. And every year we have a spring recital. And pre-pandemic was one of the last times that I was able to put on the whole Bhangra dress and perform with my fellow instructors. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that with you right now.
awesome. I'm glad you showed us that after, because if we had seen that before, it would have been so intimidating.
And that's, honestly, that is why I decided to shift around the program a little bit and teach the steps before you watch that, and we're just like, I am not going to be able to do that. But you did it, because you didn't even know how hard it was going to be. And with that, we're going to leave you for the evening. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Y'all can hang out.